He did not stay on that island for 1 second. That's a father talking about his son. Not a theory. Not a guess. A certainty carved into him by 18 years of raising a boy he thought he knew completely. His name is Elmore Wanssley. His wife is Christine. And 3 weeks ago, they buried their son, Nolan Wells. This is the first time they've spoken publicly since his body was pulled from the water off Horn Island, Mississippi. And in that first interview, Christine dropped something that stops the entire story cold. They gave me his phone back the next day, she says. Everything was gone. The messages were deleted. A star athlete. A holiday trip with friends. A phone wiped clean. And an official story that a mother and father refuse, flatly, unequivocally, to believe. Tonight, we're not going to tell you what happened to Nolan Wells. We're going to show you the timeline the authorities gave his family, and then we're going to show you everything in that timeline that doesn't add up. Because when you lay the interviews, the app data, and the phone discrepancies side by side, one uncomfortable question emerges. Why does the official story change depending on who's telling it? Before we get into the timeline, you need to understand who this young man was, because it matters. It matters for every decision that gets scrutinized later. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. A defensive back at Southwest Mississippi Community College, the kind of player coaches build programs around, disciplined, coachable, quiet until it counted. His parents don't describe him as the loudest guy in the room. They describe him as a silent leader. The guy whose presence changed the temperature of a locker room without him saying a word. He had a Division I tryout scheduled. Not someday. Not eventually. The following Monday. This was a young man with his entire life sequenced out in front of him, one more workout, one more evaluation, and a shot at the next level. So when his friend group planned a 4th of July boat trip out to Horn Island, off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, it wasn't framed as anything dangerous. It was framed as exactly what it looked like on the surface, a last hurrah. A chance to decompress with friends before the grind of a football season and a life-altering tryout consumed every waking hour. Christine and Elmore had zero reason to worry. Zero. Their son was responsible to a fault. He had rules he lived by, rules they had drilled into him since he was old enough to drive with friends. Rule number 1, if you leave with the group, you come back with the group. Hold on to that. Because everything the family has been told since July 4th violates that rule directly. The day unfolds like any holiday. A boat, a beach, friends, music, sun. Christine isn't worried through the afternoon. She isn't worried through the early evening. Kids lose track of time on trips like this, that's normal. Then, at 11:07 p.m., her phone rings. It's not Nolan. It's Warren, one of Nolan's friends from the trip, calling her directly. Christine tells us her heart dropped the second she saw his name on the screen. Because in the entire time these boys have been friends, Warren has never once called her. Not for a ride, not for a message, not for anything. Kids don't call the mom. They call each other. A call like that, at that hour, means something already went wrong hours before anyone told her. What follows is not a clean, coordinated search. It's chaos. Christine immediately calls her close friend Tashima, whose own sons grew up alongside Nolan, practically raised in the same households. She needs another set of eyes, another set of hands making calls, because the story she's getting from Warren doesn't give her a location, it gives her a problem. The friends on the boat start tracking Nolan through Snapchat's map feature. Christine, meanwhile, is watching Life 360, the family location sharing app Nolan has on his phone. And here's the first crack in the wall. The two apps do not agree. Snapchat is showing activity in one location. Life 360 is showing Nolan's phone, and separately, the vehicle associated with the trip, somewhere entirely different. Not a minor discrepancy. Not a GPS lag of a few hundred feet. Different locations altogether, with no clean explanation for why a phone and a car that should be moving together are being tracked apart. This is the moment the family stops treating this as kids lost track of time and starts treating it as an emergency. And this is also the exact moment the system starts failing them. When a family calls for help finding a missing 18-year-old on a barrier island in the middle of the night, you'd expect one clear point of contact. That is not what the Wells family got. They called the sheriff's department. Redirected. They called Ocean Springs Police. Redirected again. They reached out to the Department of Marine Resources because the location was on the water, technically outside standard land jurisdiction. Each call 8 minutes. Each transfer 8 more. And in a missing persons case near open water, minutes are not a bureaucratic inconvenience, they're the entire ballgame. Every emergency responder will tell you the same thing: the first hours are everything. It was only after this runaround that Jackson County authorities formally took over the search. By then, the family had already spent hours doing what should have been law enforcement's job from the first phone call, coordinating with friends, cross-referencing apps, trying to physically triangulate where their son actually was. Nolan's body was recovered from the water off Horn Island. And once that happened, the story law enforcement handed the family didn't just fail to explain the discrepancies from that night. It added new ones. Here is the account authorities and the friend group gave the family in the immediate aftermath. Nolan chose to stay behind on Horn Island. Voluntarily. To spend time with a girl named Katie, whom the friend group says he'd connected with that day. The boat left. Nolan stayed. Something went wrong after that. Christine and Elmore reject this outright, and not because they refuse to accept a hard truth. Because the story itself doesn't hold up against basic logic. Elmore lays it out plainly: 3 friends get on a boat. They leave a 4th friend behind, alone, on an island, without his phone. Regardless of any friction, any disagreement, any changed plans, you do not do that to someone you call a friend. You especially don't do it to someone who lives by the rule that you leave together and you come back together, a rule his own friends knew. And then there's Katie herself, a name that, in Christine's very first conversation with authorities, was presented as someone also missing. Unknown to the group. A mystery. That framing changed. Later, once the family retained attorney Ben Crump, a deeper contradiction surfaced. Katie's account, relayed secondhand, says Nolan told her he was heading back to the boat. The friend's account says Nolan told them he wanted to stay behind with Katie. Both of those statements cannot be true. Someone in this chain is not telling the truth, whether through faulty memory, panic, or deliberate misdirection. The Wells family doesn't know. But Ben Crump, on record, points to this contradiction as one of the central reasons the family cannot simply accept the story as given. We also have to address something directly, because ignoring it would be dishonest. Nolan was black, in a friend group that was predominantly white, and this case unfolded in Mississippi, a state with a documented, painful history that colors how the public reads stories like this one. Some online commentary has leaned hard into that angle. Christine's response to this has been remarkably measured. She and Elmore say plainly, they raised Nolan to love everyone, without condition, and that includes the friends on that boat. Their focus isn't on the racial makeup of the friend group. Their focus is on the gap between what they were told happened and the son they know would never have let it happen that way. That distinction matters. This isn't a family building a narrative around race. It's a family building a case around inconsistency. There's also a video, circulated widely online, capturing what sounds like an argument from that day. Ben Crump has referenced it publicly, noting that a voice, one he and the family believe to be Nolan's, can be heard saying, "Give me my freaking phone." If that's accurate, it directly contradicts the image of a relaxed, voluntary decision to stay behind with a new acquaintance. It suggests tension. It suggests something Nolan wanted that he wasn't getting. And then there's the question almost nobody wants to say out loud: Nolan was a phenomenal athlete. A strong swimmer, by every account from people who knew him. The United Cajun Navy has pointed to dangerous rip currents in that stretch of coastline, conditions that can overwhelm even elite swimmers, no question. That's a real, documented hazard. But it was a holiday weekend. A crowded beach. Families, boats, groups everywhere. The question the parents keep coming back to isn't whether rip currents are dangerous. It's this: how does a strong, athletic young man go into visible distress on a packed 4th of July beach, and not one person sees it happening? Now we arrive at the detail that, more than any other, has convinced this family something was hidden from them. When Nolan's phone was returned to the family, it was empty. Not some messages missing. Not a few gaps. Completely wiped. No saved photos. No videos. Think about that for a second. A full day at the beach, a holiday, friends, a boat. In 2024, a phone like that should be full. Dozens of photos. Videos of the water, the boat, the fireworks that night. Instead, nothing. Here's why that detail is so significant. The family checked the phone before the 24-hour window in which Snapchat automatically purges unsaved content. That window matters. It means the emptiness wasn't simply the natural life cycle of an app auto-deleting things on its own schedule. Someone would have had to manually clear saved content, delete messages, and do it before that natural deletion window even closed. That is not how phones behave on their own. That takes action. Legal analysts reviewing this case have made an important technical point. Deleting a message or a photo from a phone's visible interface does not erase it from that device's underlying memory, and it certainly doesn't erase it from the carrier's network logs. Data like that can often be recovered through proper forensic extraction, the kind of deep-level analysis that goes far beyond what a grieving family can do on their own. Which is exactly why the Wells family is now working with independent forensic experts, separate from whatever analysis, if any, law enforcement has already conducted on that device. There's one more detail worth putting on the record, because it speaks to how carelessly this case was handled in its earliest hours. A girl who was on the island that day sent the family photos of Nolan clearly wearing blue shorts. The official report on file describes him as wearing black shorts. That's not a minor clerical error you can shrug off. That's a basic factual detail about the missing person, wrong, in an official document, contradicted by photographic evidence from someone who was physically there. If a detail that simple didn't get verified, it raises the obvious question: what else in that report was never checked against the actual evidence? This case has drawn national attention, and with it, resources most grieving families never have access to. Colin Kaepernick has stepped in to fund an independent autopsy, critical, because it means the Wells family isn't relying solely on findings from the same system they believe has already gotten basic facts wrong. Tyler Perry covered funeral expenses, sparing this family at least one burden during the worst weeks of their lives. And Reverend Al Sharpton has appeared alongside the family at press conferences, lending national visibility to a case that, in a different family's hands, might never have left a local news cycle. Ben Crump's legal team has been direct about why they're proceeding with such caution and deliberateness. Mississippi's history looms over cases like this one. The name Emmett Till isn't invoked lightly by attorneys working a case in this state. It's invoked because the wounds of stories that were mishandled, buried, or explained away are still raw, still remembered, still instructive. But here's a critical limitation in this investigation that the public needs to understand. Every one of Nolan's friends from that trip has retained legal counsel. That means Crump's team has zero direct access to them. No direct interviews. No direct statements. Everything the family has about what happened on that island comes second-hand, filtered through attorneys, filtered through initial police reports, filtered through a system the family has already caught making basic errors. And that brings us to the two most scrutinized public statements in this entire case. Sheriff John Ledbetter declared there was no evidence of foul play. He said this before forensic phone data had been recovered. Before an independent autopsy had returned findings. Legal analysts watching this case have raised real concerns about that timing, not necessarily accusing him of misconduct, but questioning whether no foul play is a conclusion any official should reach before the evidence that would actually support or contradict it has even been analyzed. Separately, Judge Ashley Cole, Warren's mother, released a public statement early in the case, defending her son and, by extension, the friend group's account. Whatever her intentions, the timing of that statement, arriving before the investigation had meaningfully progressed, reads to many observers as an attempt to get ahead of a narrative rather than let the facts settle it. So where does this case actually stand tonight? The initial autopsy findings point toward drowning. The independent autopsy, funded through Colin Kaepernick's support, is still pending. The sheriff's department maintains there's no evidence of a crime. And Nolan Wells' phone, the device that could answer so many of these questions, is now in the hands of forensic experts working on behalf of a family that no longer trusts the story they were first given. Let's be clear about what this family is and is not doing. Christine and Elmore Wanssley are not chasing a conspiracy theory. They are not manufacturing drama out of grief. What they are doing is pointing, calmly and repeatedly, at the distance between the account they've been handed and the son they spent 18 years raising. A son who followed rules. A son who wouldn't leave a friend behind, and whose friends, by every rule he lived by, shouldn't have left him. They are asking why a phone came back empty. They are asking why 2 location apps told 2 different stories on the worst night of their lives. They are asking why a report got the color of his shorts wrong. And they are asking why no foul play was announced before anyone had the forensic tools in hand to actually know. Until those questions have real answers, this family has made one thing clear: they will not stop asking them. If you want to follow this case as the independent autopsy results and forensic phone recovery come in, subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll be tracking this story until Nolan Wells' family gets the answers they deserve.